I'm Maya, 29 years old, and just yesterday, I became an incredibly wealthy woman. My Aunt Patricia, the woman who took me in when I had no one else, passed away and left me everything. $3.5 million, her luxury penthouse in the heart of the city, and a controlling share of her art gallery business. I was still trying to process everything, her death, the shock of the inheritance, when the doorbell rang. And there they were, standing on the threshold of my home, my parents. The same parents who had walked out of my life 15 years ago, leaving me with nothing but a suitcase and a note. They smiled at me like no time had passed, as if everything was fine. "We're here for you now, Maya," my mother said, her voice as sweet as it had been when I was a child. She stepped inside without waiting for me to invite her. I stood frozen in shock. The emotions came rushing back, years of hurt, abandonment, confusion, all surfacing at once. But before I could say anything, the door swung open again and my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, walked in. His eyes flicked to my parents and suddenly, the air in the room felt heavy. Their faces went from smiles to ghostly pale. Before I dive deeper into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever had to deal with toxic family members, hit that like button, and make sure to subscribe to join our growing community of storytellers. I still remember the last time I saw my parents. I was 14, living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that, at the time, seemed to me like the whole world. My dad worked long hours in construction, while my mom took care of me. We weren't wealthy, but we had a certain rhythm to our life that, for a while, felt perfect. The weekends were filled with small joys, movie nights with my mom, going to the park with my dad, and homemade dinners. I was happy, and I thought they were too. But looking back now, there were warning signs I didn't understand. The arguments behind closed doors. The tension in the air when my father came home late after working overtime. The long phone calls he would take in the backyard, sometimes even sneaking into the garage. I overheard him once, talking about money troubles, but as a kid, I didn't understand the severity. It was only when I started getting older that I realized something was off. My father wasn't just stressed from work, he had developed a serious gambling problem. What started as occasional trips to the casino turned into desperate weekend getaways, draining our savings. I overheard him begging my mom to give him one last chance, promising that things would get better. But promises, like loose coins, meant nothing to him. My mom, on the other hand, was slipping into a deep depression. The warm woman who once baked cookies for me started staying in bed for days. She would cry at night when she thought I was asleep, but in the morning, she would cover it up with a smile, acting like everything was okay. I could see the stress on her face, but I didn't know how to help. I thought if I could just be perfect enough, things would go back to normal. Then, one morning, it all changed. I woke up to an empty apartment. The silence was so loud, it felt suffocating. I wandered through the rooms, trying to make sense of what had happened. My parents' bedroom was empty, their things gone. I searched frantically, but the only thing I found was a note from my mom. It was short, just a few lines scribbled in her handwriting. "Maya, we're sorry. We couldn't do this anymore. Your Aunt Patricia will take care of you. We love you." I called her cell phone, again and again, but it went straight to voicemail. My father's phone had been disconnected. I was alone. I sat in the living room, crying and wondering where they had gone, why they had left without saying goodbye. I felt abandoned. I didn't know what to do. The next few days were a blur. I lived off cereal, terrified of telling anyone what had happened. The landlord came knocking, asking about the overdue rent. I didn't know how to explain, so I told him that my parents were out of town. It was only when Child Protective Services showed up that I realized I couldn't pretend anymore. Thankfully, my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, stepped in. I had barely seen her in years, but she was the one who came to my rescue. Aunt Patricia was a successful gallery owner, and although she didn't have the warmest personality, I knew that she was reliable. I didn't expect her to be a nurturing mother figure, but she was there when I needed her. The transition to living with Aunt Patricia was a shock. Her penthouse was nothing like the small apartment I'd grown up in. Everything was sleek, polished, and immaculate. My room was bigger than the entire apartment I had shared with my parents. There were rules, strict ones, and Aunt Patricia was not a woman who tolerated disobedience. No shoes on the marble floors, dinner at exactly 7 p.m., and quiet study time every evening. But she never once yelled at me, never once made me feel small, even when I was rebellious. Her love was shown in a different way, through consistency and structure. She worked long hours, but she made sure I had everything I needed, and even though she didn't say it, I could tell she cared in her own way. For years, I buried the pain of my parents leaving. I focused on school, on succeeding in ways I thought would make me feel better. I was determined to make Aunt Patricia proud. But then something happened. I was 22, halfway through college, when Aunt Patricia called me into her office. I had been expecting a routine conversation about my grades or future plans. But what I didn't expect was the revelation that changed everything. She told me she had been preparing me for something big. My inheritance. Before we get to that shocking moment, let me know in the comments if you've ever had a family member step in and become your rock. Do you think family should be defined by blood, or by the people who show up for you when you need them the most? Aunt Patricia's words echoed in my mind long after she'd left the room. She had said it so matter-of-factly, like it was just another piece of business she had to manage, like it wasn't the news that would change my entire life. Maya, I've been preparing you for this. Your parents, they left you nothing. But I have made sure you will have everything you need. I had sat there, my mind racing, trying to process what she was telling me. She wasn't just my guardian, she was my everything now. I had come to rely on her in ways I hadn't fully understood at the time. But this was a whole different level. I'm not leaving you in the dark, Maya. You're going to inherit my business, my estate. Everything I've worked for. You'll need to take over when I'm gone. I've set everything up. Her tone was calm, detached even. Aunt Patricia wasn't the type to get emotional or sentimental about these things. She had never told me she loved me, and for a long time, I didn't expect her to. She showed her care in practical ways, giving me the stability I needed, making sure I had the best education, taking me on business trips when I was older, teaching me the ropes of the art gallery world. But love, that wasn't part of the equation. I remember looking at her as she spoke, trying to process what she was saying, but her words didn't quite register. This wasn't just about a family business or a fortune, it was about the fact that, in many ways, she had been the mother I never had. She was the one who had kept showing up, who had kept providing, even when my biological parents had disappeared from my life. Do you understand, Maya? She asked again, looking at me over her glasses. This isn't just about money. It's about keeping the gallery going, keeping everything in place. You have the potential, I know that. But this is a responsibility. And there will be no one else to help you with it. I nodded, my mind a blur. How could I possibly fill her shoes? Aunt Patricia had built her gallery from the ground up. She had a reputation in the art world. I had watched her for years, but I had never really seen the weight of what she carried. She wasn't just an art dealer. She was a businesswoman, a powerhouse. And now that power was being handed over to me. She had spent years setting things up for me. A legal team, financial advisors, investments, insurance, everything was in place for me to take control when the time came. But the part that really hit me was that my parents wouldn't get a cent. Aunt Patricia had made sure of that. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about family felt like it was flipping upside down. I had spent years dreaming of reconciliation, of a day when my parents would come back into my life and we would make it all work again. But this inheritance, this sudden weight of responsibility, it made me realize something. They had left me. They had walked out on me without a second thought, and now, they wanted in on the fortune they thought would be handed to them on a silver platter. It was only a few days after Aunt Patricia's death that the first hint of this came to me. I received a letter, an official-looking envelope with my mother's handwriting on it. I had never been good at ignoring my emotions, so when I saw the familiar scrawl on the envelope, my heart skipped a beat. Opening it was like reopening an old wound. My mother, who I hadn't seen in 15 years, was asking to meet. She wanted to talk. She had heard about the will, and according to the letter, they wanted to reconnect. They were sorry for what happened. They were better now, and they had changed. I threw the letter down, anger rising in me. How could they even have the nerve? The timing was clear to me. They hadn't reached out when I needed them. They hadn't called when I was struggling to make sense of their abandonment. But now, when money was involved, they thought they could waltz back into my life like nothing had happened. They thought they could just pick up where they had left off, as if 15 years of silence didn't matter. I wasn't some fool waiting for them to make up for all the lost time. I had already built my life, Aunt Patricia had made sure of that. She had given me the tools I needed to succeed, to stand on my own, and now that she was gone, I was expected to carry that weight. But I wasn't going to let them back in. Not like this. The day they showed up at my door, I could hardly believe my eyes. My father, looking like he had aged a decade, and my mother, wearing a new layer of makeup that only made her look more fragile, stood there in front of me. Their smiles were polite, almost rehearsed. My father reached out first, like he was trying to re-establish the bond we had once shared. But there was nothing. Nothing left to rebuild. Maya, my father said, his voice sounding different now. It had lost the warmth it once had. It's been too long. We know we messed up, but we're here now. We want to be a part of your life again. We've seen everything in the news about your aunt's passing, and we just wanted to reach out. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was disbelief. How could they think they could walk back into my life as if they hadn't ripped it apart all those years ago? Do you really think you can just show up now? I asked quietly, my voice controlled but full of bitterness. After all these years of silence. You couldn't be bothered to send a card or a letter, but now you want to be a part of my life because I've inherited a fortune. Is that how this works? My father looked taken aback, but my mother spoke up, the tears already welling in her eyes. Maya, please. We're sorry. We didn't know how to face you after what we did. We didn't have anything to offer you back then. But now, we want to make things right. We're asking for a chance to prove that we've changed. I shook my head, disbelief flooding me. You had your chance. You had 15 years to reach out. You could have called, could have tried, but you didn't. And now that there's money involved, you show up asking for forgiveness. That's not how this works. They stood there, silent now, their faces red with embarrassment. My father, trying to regain his composure, spoke again. We weren't perfect, Maya. We made mistakes. But we can be a family again. We can help you with the business. We have experience. I cut him off. You're right. You're not perfect. You abandoned me. And now, you're trying to worm your way back in. Not because you care about me, but because you care about the money. My mother flinched, but I didn't care. I wasn't the naive little girl anymore. I wasn't going to be manipulated. And let's be clear, I continued. I've been managing this business for years now. I don't need your help, and I certainly don't need your excuses. The silence between us was thick, and my father shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't know where you were," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. "We tried to find you. We thought about you every day." "Well, thinking doesn't mean anything," I said, staring them down. "Actions do." I knew the next part of the conversation wasn't going to be easy. I was about to confront them about the real reason they had shown up. The air in the room was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of the years pressing down on me. Every time my parents spoke, it was like they were peeling back layers of old wounds that I had spent years trying to forget. "We didn't want to hurt you, Maya," my father finally said, his voice softening in a way that made my stomach twist. "We were just lost. We thought we were doing the right thing by leaving. You were better off with Aunt Patricia. We couldn't give you what she could. Better off." My heart beat louder in my chest. They had abandoned me. They didn't get to play the "we thought we were doing the right thing" card. Not now, not after everything that had happened. I wasn't the child who needed comforting anymore. I had learned the hard way that no one was going to fix my pain for me. "You didn't think about what I needed," I replied, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I needed you. I needed my parents, not excuses. I needed someone to show up. To show me that I mattered. But instead, you just left." My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling as she tried to touch mine. I pulled my hand back sharply, not wanting her pity. "I don't want your pity," I said, cutting her off before she could say another word. "I don't want your apologies either. Not after all this time." They looked at me, their faces red with the weight of my words. But even through their guilt, I saw something else, a glimmer of something that I knew too well. The desperation. They weren't here because they wanted to make things right with me. They were here for something else. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms tightly across my chest. "You didn't come back because you love me," I said, my voice steely. "You came back because of the money." My father's face darkened, and I could see the anger creeping into his eyes. "That's not true," he said, his tone defensive now. "We didn't know about the inheritance until a few days ago. We just wanted a chance to make things right." "Make things right," I repeated bitterly. "You don't just get to come back after 15 years and expect everything to magically be fixed. You didn't show up when I needed you. Not once. You didn't check in, you didn't try to make amends. But now that there's money involved, you think you can just waltz back into my life." Their silence was telling. I could see the truth in their eyes, the uncomfortable realization that they had been caught in their own lies. They hadn't cared about me. They had cared about what I could give them. And now that I was standing on the other side of their betrayal, I wasn't going to let them play their cards with me. "Let's be honest," I continued, my words sharp and cold. "You left me to fend for myself, and when you found out I had inherited something worth your time, suddenly you care. That's not love. That's manipulation." My father opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. "No. Don't even try to deny it. You didn't care enough to pick up the phone. You didn't care enough to check on me. You didn't even care enough to make sure I was okay. But now that Aunt Patricia is gone and I'm the one with the money, you think you can just come in and take what's mine." The anger was starting to burn inside me now, a fire that I couldn't control. The betrayal, the abandonment, it was all surfacing in ways I hadn't expected. And I wasn't about to let them walk away scot-free. "Do you know what it was like?" I said, my voice trembling slightly now, but my anger pushing through. "To grow up thinking you had parents who loved you, only to find out you were nothing but an afterthought. To spend every day wondering where you went wrong, what I had done to make you leave. I spent years feeling abandoned, and now you want to waltz back into my life like everything is fine." My mother's eyes were filling with tears now, but I didn't care. We're sorry, she whispered, choking on the words. We didn't know how to face you. We thought you'd be better off without us. Better off without you? I repeated, the disbelief almost choking me. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Do you have any idea what it's like to wake up every day with the hole you left in my life? You took everything from me, and now you want to come back because you need something from me. No. That's not how this works. There was a long, heavy silence between us. My parents were both staring at me, their faces a mixture of shame and something else I couldn't quite place. Maybe regret, maybe guilt, but it didn't matter now. Nothing they said could change what had happened. Finally, my father spoke again, his voice low and tight. Look, Maya. We've been through a lot. We know we made mistakes. But we want to make it up to you. We want to be there for you now, to help you with the business, to help you manage everything. I scoffed, the sound sharp in the otherwise silent room. Help me with the business. I repeated, disbelief curling in my chest. You've been gone for 15 years and now you want to swoop in and play the helpful parent. You think you can just show up and take control of everything? My father's frustration was clear. You don't understand what it's like, Maya, he spat, his voice rising. We've been struggling. We've been living in poverty while your aunt lived in luxury, flaunting everything she had. We've been struggling to make ends meet, and now, you have everything. Everything. You're right, I said quietly, letting the silence hang between us. You have been struggling. And that's because you made choices. You chose gambling over family. You chose selfishness over me. And now that I'm the one with something you want, suddenly you're here, acting like you're concerned about my well-being. My father didn't respond immediately. His face flushed with anger, but he said nothing. He was defeated, and I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped. He had no more excuses. Don't think you can just walk back into my life and demand things, I continued, my voice growing steadier with each word. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. You don't get to guilt me into giving you a second chance. You had your chance, and you failed. They were quiet now, and I could feel the weight of their failure hanging in the air. Do you want to know what my real family looks like? I asked, my voice cold but firm. It's Aunt Patricia, who raised me and made sure I never went without. It's the people who have supported me when I had nothing. People who didn't leave me when things got hard. That's family. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His face was red with frustration, and I could see the anger building in his chest. This isn't over, Maya, he muttered, shaking his head. You'll regret this. You'll regret pushing us away when you need us most. I stood up too, meeting his gaze head-on. No, I won't, I said calmly. I'll never regret letting you go. The door slammed behind them as they left. The silence that followed felt final. But as I sat back down, the weight of it all started to settle in. The reality of what I had just done hit me, the final cut, the boundary that I had drawn in the sand. I had let them go. For good. And it felt freeing. The door slammed behind them, and I sat there, heart racing, my mind still spinning from the final confrontation. I stared at the spot where my parents had just stood, the weight of the years pressing down on me. For a long time, I had wondered what it would feel like if they ever came back. Would I be angry? Relieved? Would I be able to forgive them? Now I knew. It wasn't forgiveness they were looking for, it was control. They had never cared about making things right, not really. They just wanted to take what I had worked so hard to build. They hadn't changed. They'd just gotten better at pretending. But I was done pretending. I was done being the little girl they left behind, waiting for their love, waiting for them to show up when I needed them most. Now, I was a woman who had learned how to stand on her own, how to take the pieces of her broken past and rebuild herself. The silence in the room felt heavy, but for the first time in a long while, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The anger that had burned inside me just moments ago began to fade. It wasn't because I had forgiven them, it was because I had finally let go. Letting go of the anger, the hurt, the hope that they would someday come back and be the parents I needed. I had learned that family wasn't just about who shared your blood, but about who showed up. Aunt Patricia had shown up every single day, through the good and the bad. She had built something with her own two hands, and she had shared that legacy with me. She didn't just give me a place to stay, she gave me the tools to thrive. She showed me that love isn't about grand gestures, but about being there when it matters the most. And now, I was going to honor that legacy. I knew what I had to do next. I walked over to the desk where Aunt Patricia's will sat neatly arranged, the final pieces of her estate ready to be signed over to me. The legal team had already gone over everything, and there was no question about my inheritance. But there was something else I needed to do, something more important than money. I grabbed the pen, feeling the weight of it in my hand. It wasn't just about taking control of her business or the property she left me. It was about the future, my future. And the future I wanted to create for others. Aunt Patricia had always been about growth, and it was time for me to carry that forward. I signed the document, not just because I had to, but because it was what she would have wanted. The art gallery, the estate, everything would continue. But I was going to make it my own. I would take everything she had taught me and use it to build something even bigger, something that honored her, but also honored the woman I had become. I would take the reins and show the world what it meant to build from the ground up. But beyond that, I had a bigger dream. The Patricia West Foundation. Using a portion of my inheritance, would create a nonprofit to support children and young adults who had been abandoned or left behind. I would provide therapy, mentorship, and financial support to help them build the lives they deserved. I had been given a second chance, and now it was time to pay that forward. As I sat back and looked at the signed documents, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This wasn't just about wealth, it was about making a difference. And this time, I wasn't doing it for anyone but myself. I spent the next few weeks making changes, transforming the gallery into a space where artists from underrepresented communities could showcase their work, a space where creativity was celebrated and supported. I started meeting with a team of like-minded people, building a foundation that would provide support for those who needed it most. It wasn't easy. There were challenges, of course, people who tried to undermine me, who doubted my ability to take on such a big responsibility. But I had learned from Aunt Patricia that you don't back down just because things get tough. You push forward, you fight for what's right, and you trust yourself. And that's exactly what I did. 6 months later, I stood in front of a group of investors, presenting my vision for the Patricia West Foundation. It was a moment I had dreamed of for so long, but now it was real. The foundation was thriving, the business was booming, and I had never felt more in control of my life. And then, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from my mother. I opened it hesitantly, knowing I wasn't expecting anything from her. But this time, the tone was different. She wasn't asking for money, or forgiveness, or trying to manipulate me. She simply said she was sorry for what had happened. She apologized for everything, leaving me, the years of silence, the pain she had caused. I read the letter twice, taking in her words, the sincerity behind them. It didn't change everything. It didn't fix the past. But in that moment, I realized that I had already moved on. I didn't need her apology to move forward. I had already forgiven myself for everything I had gone through, and I had found my peace. I put the letter down and smiled. It wasn't the fairy tale I had once dreamed of. But it was my reality. A reality that I had built through hard work, determination, and the love I had found in the people who had truly cared for me. Family wasn't about blood. It was about the ones who stood by you, who loved you not because they had to, but because they chose to. And as for my parents, I would let them go. For good. Because I had learned something that day, something that Aunt Patricia had known all along. You don't need to be tied to your past to create the future you deserve. Thank you for watching. If you've ever struggled with family, abandonment, or redefining your life, I hope this story spoke to you. Sometimes the hardest things to let go of are the ones that have been with you the longest, but it's in letting go that we find our true strength. Make sure to subscribe to Dear Karma for more stories like this. If you're facing your own challenges with family, or just need a little inspiration to take control of your life, remember, you are never alone. Share this video with anyone you think might need a reminder that it's never too late to build the life you want. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the family we choose brings more healing than the family we are born into.